Warm welcome to everyone joining us for the very first session in the Encode Polkadot Educate series. So today we will be starting off with an intro to Polkadot in the form of a very awesome fireside chat format, which is essentially like an intimate panel discussion. And here we have our three wonderful speakers today. We have Alex from Polka Häus, Emily from Parity, and Irvin from OpenDive. So feel free to give a bit of an introduction to yourselves, everyone. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm excited to get this session going.
Cool. Yeah, we are too. I guess I'll kind of take over here to moderation. Yeah, good to see everyone. And I'll just give a super quick intro for myself, and then we'll go with the rest of my colleagues here. I'll see you. So I'm Alex from, Polka Häus, and also Sumi and a couple other projects. I've been involved in the Polkadot ecosystem for several years now, and really excited to be here with you guys. I brought on two great folks with me for this fireside chat because I figured it'd be good to just kind of throw some ideas around why we're all involved in this ecosystem. So with that, I'll kind of hand it over to Emily to introduce herself, and we'll kind of talk to her.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Emily. I have been working in the Polkadot ecosystem and essentially for Web3 Foundation and or Parity Technologies for over 4.5 years now. So since mid 2018 and still here. I started out leading the social media and still do, but now I am the director of ecosystem marketing and community. So I lead the ecosystem marketing initiatives and working with all of the Parachain teams, and then also leading the ambassador program and the community team. And so all the public facing Polkadot stuff, or the not public facing, but working with the greater community in all aspects. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey guys, my name is Irvin. In general, I've been in the space since 2012. I had a Bitcoin startup early on, got a chance to work with a bunch of different ecosystems, ended up getting involved in the Polkadot, or learning about Polkadot early on when I met Dr. Gavin Wood, and just been in really the ecosystem as a substrate developer in the first batch, and also with Polka Häus. And I also run a gaming studio focused on Web3 gaming and augmented reality.
Cool. Well, guys, yeah, I brought you guys both on because I figured we could have a cool little chat about, why, basically what I like to say is why we Polkadot, because it's been a long time that we've all been involved in the ecosystem. We've all seen other ecosystems come, some have gone, and there's, I think, a reason why folks stick around the Polkadot ecosystem for a long time. So kind of with that, I'd kind of like to start off with I guess we could start with Emily. Emily, kind of take us back to 2018, right when Polkadot's getting started. There was a retreat in 2017 in Ibiza before you joined, I guess, but kind of take us back there, to kind of the reasoning why Polkadot, go as deep as you want, but maybe just touch on these ideals around Web3 and why you think Polkadot was created.
Right, that's a very loaded question. Why Web3? Why was Polkadot created? What happened in Ibiza? And all the burning questions. But essentially, Web3, the term Web3 was actually coined by Gavin Wood, who is the founder of Polkadot, but he coined it in 2014 when he was at Ethereum, because he's also the previous co-founder and CTO of Ethereum. And so, essentially today, I definitely think like Web3 is this term that means a better internet. And there are a lot of things that claim to be Web3. There's a lot of different definitions of what you can find is Web3 out there. I think, you know, for myself, if when I think of Web3, I think of like 4 distinct values. Like Web3 is decentralized. And actually kind of all 4 of these values kind of rely on there is no, they are all centered around, there is no centralized parties and there is no centralized trusted parties that you need to trust. So it is decentralized, it is trustless, it is permissionless, and then the 4th one is it has its own native payments. And I would like to just clarify that one, because you don't need to have a cryptocurrency to be Web3 or to have a company around the Web3 values. However, if you have integrated payments into what you're providing in any sort of way, then it has a trustless payment system where you're not using trusted banks or centralized banks, right? And that sort of thing. So that's what I think about when I think about Web3. And again, Gavin coined this term, and to what I think is to, you know, essentially bring up what many crypto people were thinking back then or feeling back then, is just like the problems with the current state of the World Wide Web. And that it's centered around these large conglomerates and a few individuals of large centralized parties that you just had to trust in order to use the internet, and which is where Web3 is not that. And so you can't talk a kind of about you know, maybe when you think about why does Polkadot exist, without maybe touching on like the early founders and the people that created it and how they were coming primarily, a lot of them from Ethereum, right? And where they built something great, but they also wanted to take it one step further. And that was things like, you know, once they built Ethereum, I don't want to speak for anyone because I genuinely don't know, but there was issues with proof of work, right? It wasn't as scalable, it wasn't as fast. It did require a lot of massive computing and a lot of massive storage. It was not energy efficient, right? When we think about a world running on Web3, there's a lot of arguments against proof of work. Even Elon Musk tweeted about it. But he used it as blockchain as a whole. He's like, wow, if the whole world is run on blockchain, then like we don't have the energy for this. And I'm like, you don't know about proof of stake. You just know about Dogecoin and Bitcoin and Ethereum. So anyways, and now we're even seeing ETH move to proof of stake as well. So one of the things I think about of Polkadot is obviously this proof of work, proof of stake. There's also a lot of other minor things. You know, Ethereum was a smart contract platform, right? And that is, when you think about that, that's like in these terms, you would say Ethereum is a layer 1, and then it's smart contracts and applications on top of Ethereum. But what happens when you want to be a chain, when you want to be Ethereum and you want more functionality than just an application, ergo Polkadot. On Polkadot, you can be a chain, or you can be a dApp on top of one of Polkadot's, just speaking to live smart contract platforms that we have today, a Star, Moonbeam, Akala's integrating smart contract functionality, and then there's others in the pipeline like Gear. So that was like another thing, right? Ethereum didn't allow you to be a chain. You could only be a dApp, and a lot of business use cases need more than just an application. And so then ergo Polkadot, and I'm sure there's a ton more. We could dive into what is the difference between EIPs on Ethereum and an actual democratic, fair governance, which, you know, Polkadot offers. You could talk about security. You can talk about trustless bridges and, you know, the bridge hacks of how we could just talk about the last year. There's a lot of solutions that Polkadot has over, and there's, and I know even saying all of this, I'm forgetting like 10. and 15. So I want to give that, but also give Irvin the time and stuff, because I could spend the rest of the hour talking about what are the things that I think Polkadot solves that were just not possible.
Yeah, and that's kind of, this is a whirlwind of information you just threw out there, and that's what comes with 5 years working behind a project. And there's one thing you said there that really resonates with me, and I think is kind of part of the reason why I think we're all involved still in Polkadot is there's a lot of lessons learned, both from the founding team and the team that helped create what is now Polkadot now. There's a lot of lessons learned from the Ethereum days, a lot of research that's gone into that. There's a ton of researchers that are involved in the structuring around Polkadot. There's a lot of thought that went into these ideas that you just mentioned, like shared security, like governance, like proof of stake as a whole. Irvin, you've been in the blockchain space for a long time, right? You created a Bitcoin startup, I think back in 2012, 2013. And you've seen a lot of these projects. You're a Solidity developer, you're a Substrate developer, you develop in Rust, you've built projects on Solana, you've built projects on Polkadot, you've built projects on Moonbeam, you've built projects on Ethereum. Kind of talk to us a little bit about why this idea around Substrate and Polkadot interested you in the beginning.
Yeah, I think picking up really briefly on Emily's initial point is, at least myself and my team, when we think about Web3, we really think about the core values from which the technology came from, right? We think about disintermediation of centralized entities. Web3 is about that, and it's about disrupting power asymmetries, right? And what I mean by that is that data symmetry, conglomerate asymmetry, and so forth. And so that's where we come from when we look at Polkadot and Substrate overall. But really what intrigued me and what intrigued my team at the very beginning was, because when we looked at distributed systems or just blockchains in general, right? Early on when Bitcoin came about, people assessed that there was various things that would not scale, right? And so even as proof of work was proposed, and proof of work was proposed early on in some Bitcoin talk forums, there was discussions that it wouldn't scale either, right? And like, look, proof of work doesn't scale, and even traditional proof of stake doesn't scale in particular axis, right? Because one axis that people consider, everyone considers, is really from a technical perspective. They say, okay, does the system scale technically? But we also have to consider economic scalability. We have to consider social scalability, right? And when you have a blockchain that is already considered all these things from the beginning and cannot actually change or upgrade itself, it constrains these types of scalabilities. And so when I first read like the yellow paper, and also I heard about Gavin Woods thinking about these kind of ability or way to create bespoke blockchains or domain-specific blockchains, it kind of hit me, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because in essence, like one of the things that is really attractive from Polkadot and Substrate is that it took a lot of time to kind of get to where it's at, right? I think it was like 2016, 2017 when things started first going around ideating, and then back in 2020 when like the official launch came about. And this is a great thing because it took a lot of thinking and it took a lot of architecting in terms of how these systems will come together, right? How can you create these bespoke or domain-specific blockchains? And so you really don't see that a lot in other projects early on. I'm not going to name, these blockchains that came about, which essentially just were based off Bitcoin or based off, the future work of Ethereum. And in reality, we weren't considering things like the technical scalability or the social scalability or the economic scalability. And so when you look at Polkadot and Substrate, you have the ability to kind of change the system, the blockchain, to kind of scale out in these axes, right? You could upgrade the software continuously without being constrained, which doesn't really happen in traditional layer one blockchains. And so that's really one of the things that really attracted me to Polkadot and the technical perspective, and the other part is really the vision and the thinking. And I'll say, like, personally, I was really kind of like, I really enjoyed like discussing with the folks building Polkadot and Substrate, because I'm a PhD candidate, and so I do take sometimes a lot of time to kind of think and architect and research how these systems scale out. And so that was very attractive to me, because at the very end, really, blockchain systems are socio-technical systems, right? They're not just pure technology, but they also have the social component. And so if you were to kind of modify the blockchain itself to adapt to these social needs or social changes, then anything could happen, and you could use a blockchain for almost anything that happens in the real world.
All right, that's an awesome answer, Irvin. And so I think for the audience, I think you guys can kind of start to gather kind of this why we Polkadot, right? But now let's kind of get into what is Polkadot, I guess. We've kind of described it here superficially. We've described the ethos. We've described the ideology behind it. But for those that are quite unfamiliar with what Polkadot actually is, and then how to actually deploy something on top of it, I guess I'll hand it over to you, Emily. I'll kind of frame the question for you to answer, but since you're now on the ecosystem side. But let's kind of talk to the folks here in the audience about how to actually do something on Polkadot, right? So, what is Polkadot? Let's explain what this relay chain is, and then also this idea around parachains. And maybe when you get to the end of parachains, we can touch on parachains as you go, kind of this parathread idea, but let's kind of start with the relay chain and the parachains.
Got it. Yeah. So Polkadot too, and also like you said, Alex, I'm the ecosystem guy. So on one side, and for the longest time, when we think about Polkadot, we think about the relay chain and parachains, which is what it is. But at a high level, Polkadot I like to see as like an ecosystem, but even more than that, it's a community of people, right? Because there are the chain builders, those that are building the parachains, and then there's dApps on top of those parachains, but then there's also ambassadors, and there is dot holders. And dot holders, really quick, is it's more than just having the token, because Polkadot really has this movement of like the token actually has a utility, right? By being a token holder, you can vote on governance. You can vote with OpenGov on treasury proposals and how these funds are spent. You can decide, or you can delegate to a trusted party to vote on your behalf. You can stake and help secure the network. You can participate in crowd loans, and there's just a lot of things that you can do. So you really, I just wanted to say that like what is Polkadot to me? It's all of these aspects. It's all of these players, and it's all of these. An ecosystem of people, and then there's also investors, and there's validators, and there's collators on the parachains, and it's just bigger and bigger. So I like to think of it as this community and society. But now to like zone in on the relay chain and parachains, right? Who are really like, if you want to use Polkadot, you're either a chain, if you want to build something on Polkadot, you're a chain builder. But then if you want to build a dApp or something, or join the movement, you're not necessarily a builder. But so Polkadot has this relay chain, which provides security to the entire network and everything built on top of it. And then we have these parachains that run in parallel to the relay chain, which is why they're called Parachains, just to bring it full circle. And these are, I would like to argue that Polkadot is the most diverse ecosystem of parachains. I mean, we have everything from IoT to robonomics to smart contract platforms to DeFi and NFTs, but also a supply chain and metaverses. And so it's this robust ecosystem of chains. And there are other robust ecosystems like Polygon and Ethereum on the dApp level. but I would argue that Polkadot has the most robust ecosystem on the chain level. And then on top of that, we have dApps as well. And they also provide all of these use cases as well. So that in a sense, a parachain is a blockchain that is connected to Polkadot's relay chain. And by winning, they secure a lease slot of 2 years by winning an auction. Now, this auction is just an upfront cost that you get entirely back at the end. You can also choose to crowdsource it with the community of dot holders instead of pay for it yourself. And then again, at the end of these 2 years, all of the money is given back. And so it's not like a payment that you give, but it is just a, what's the word I'm thinking of? Just an upfront deposit. Yeah, it's a security deposit, like when you think of like an apartment. So that is Parachains. Do you want me to touch on pay-as-you-go Parachains or pair threads?
No, we can touch on that in a second here, because I think I think this is as an introduction to Polkadot. We're going to get more complex as we go along. So for, I think the audience here is somewhat a complex audience. We've been told it's mostly developers, so I think they should be able to follow along with this terminology and the likes. But you'll hear a lot of new words here. So this word parachain is a word that only exists in the ecosystem. Claudia is telling us to show XCM, which is cross-chain messaging. So kind of when we can get into that now, actually, with Irvin. Irvin, let's go a little deeper now, right? So we've been introduced to this idea of what a relay chain is, what a parachain is. Now let's talk about how these different chains can interact and how Polkadot is different from other blockchains in that perspective. Kind of talk to us a little bit about what you kind of see as advantages in the Polkadot ecosystem around potentially cross-chain messaging, even bridges and all this other stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, like, to provide a bit of context why sort of this notion of bespoke or domain-specific blockchains are sort of needed is that when you think about, for example, a financial application, and just for context, I used to work at a big financial institution. I led blockchain strategy, and you can think about, for example, a financial application or a DeFi application needs to perform liquidations, right? And so the question is here that if this application is running autonomously and it's relying on the fundamental heterogeneous or actually homogeneous infrastructure, the question is, how do you prioritize which liquidations will take place, right, in the context of the DeFi or financial application? And so in traditional layer ones or just any other kind of blockchain, usually this is done through gas, right? So essentially there's a bit of a gas war. There's some kind of like fee model that people have to pay to essentially become the first in line to kind of liquidate the transactions. And so you can imagine that this doesn't really scale out. If you're trying to build a really high throughput application or financial application, then you're not only competing with people using your application for financial transactions, but perhaps other applications such as games, such as a social dApp, and so forth, right? And so this is what happens really currently in layer ones. And so then what happens with Polkadot and Substrate is that if you want to provide a robust experience, or let's say in the context of DeFi application, of high throughput DeFi application, you can create your own parachain or your own blockchain that gives this high throughput or high fidelity user experience to your customers, right? Without having to work with other transactions or other users using different applications. And so that's one of the neat things that happens with Polkadot and Substrate. And so from then on, you can think about like even going a bit deeper to say, well, if you look at a traditional business application or product, maybe an e-commerce application, right? An e-commerce usually rewarded for being a loyal customer, right? Loyalty point or reward points. And so that means that for every transaction or interaction to make with the application, you receive some kind of points or bonuses. Well, how can we replicate that on an application layer or on the blockchain, right? Well, in L1s, then that means you're going to have to put it on the contract layer and so forth. And then you have to interact with like the virtual machine, which means that you're always going to have to charge gas and so forth. And so it gets a bit obtuse. And so like, I'll give you another use case really briefly. What about for gaming, right? In gaming, if you currently play, let's say Call of Duty or CSGO or even Fortnite, right? A lot of times you buy loot boxes, season passes, or you buy skins, okay? And so within these marketplaces, you get charged, yeah, a small fee for example, buying the item, but for gifting or sending it to your friend, you don't get charged anything, right? And so if we try to replicate that in current layer ones or traditional blockchains, we're left with this notion of having to pay gas fee or having to always pay this kind of fee to perform any kind of transactions. And so when you look at what you can do with Polkadot and Substrate, well, you can create these models such as the loyalty points or even the notion of having feeless transactions in your own blockchain, right? And you could do this through Substrate in general. And so, for example, you can identify, well, what addresses or what accounts are my loyal customers, or where accounts are my most daily active users in my game, and you could provide them this better user experience. Okay, so now that you have that notion of creating this amazing user experience by using this own dedicated blockchain, well, what if now my user of my quote unquote game or metaverse wants to perhaps interact with another game or another metaverse, right? Or perhaps wants to interact with a social application or a DeFi application, right? That might be hosted on a different chain. And so then we're left with, well, what do we do? Well, in the layer one world and the traditional Ethereum model, you have this notion of bridges, right? And the bridges essentially is the notion of having contracts across two different chains and then a messaging layer. So then you have layer one here, Ethereum, and the other chain. They both have contracts. If you want to send a transaction or asset from here to here, then you're going to go ahead and lock up this asset in this contract. The messaging layer is going to tell this blockchain that you locked it up, and this one is going to mint a new asset. And so there's a lot of inherent risk with doing this, as you guys have heard about or seen over the past few years with bridges getting hacked and so forth, due to the nature of how they're built, such as like using multi-signature contracts and so forth. And so within Polkadot, there's this notion of cross messaging, where you don't need to directly have a bridge to really communicate how the assets transact between this blockchain and this other blockchain, right? And so the cross messaging allows you to directly message each blockchain and tell them that an asset has been created and you want to use it in another chain directly. And so that's like the high level overview of what's innovative and really exciting about cross messaging. We can go deeper too if you want, but I don't want to just kind of like get too technical. Emily, maybe you can chime in on that too.
Yeah.
I'll just chime in really quick, as everything you said is 100% correct, and I just wanted to take it one more level, because like you said, it's sometimes people think it's just messaging, right? It's just like sending a message back and forth, or even sending an arbitrary message back and forth, meaning sending text, right? Because a lot of these blockchains may have token transfers, but there's no ability for them to have send like text messages, right? And communicate with one another. XCM also allows that, but it also allows you to, send NFTs. It allows you to call commands on other chains. Some of the really cool, radical things that we've already seen XCM used for is when like a star transferred its parachain lease slot on Kusama. So it was a star's Kusama version is called Shiden. Their lease had expired and they needed to renew their new lease, and they won the auction. So they had two lease spots, and one that was expiring and this new one, and they transferred all the chain functionality from this chain to the new lease slot using XCM. Right. And this is like by calling a command, not by like just transferring it, but actually the new parachain called the old parachain to send it. And so and then they logged into the old parachain to accept it, right? That you can't just, there needs to be when the other side needs to accept, but that's like really this doesn't happen anywhere else, right? This is, so it has like a bunch of use cases and things that it can do. And I think the ability to call something on another chain is one of the real novel killer use cases, because if you're, in this space, if you're like Sushi Swap, you kind of have to integrate with every single blockchain, just because like the interoperability between them is like trustless bridges. And we've mentioned it now like 3 times, and we're like, we're not going to get into that, but you know what I mean? And so what they do is they deploy everywhere. Well, imagine like this dApp being able to call its dApp on Ethereum to do a particular action, right? So that to transfer funds to Polkadot or that sort of thing. And that there's a lot of use cases you can do there. And there's a lot more other use cases for XCM. There's like a bunch of different applications for it, let's say, but that I just wanted to touch on as well, because it is called cross-chain messaging. And sometimes we only think about the messaging, but there is a lot of killer use cases there as well. Over to you. Back to you, Alex.
Yeah,
no, that's good. That's good. And I actually,
Yeah, go ahead, Alex. I was going to say that's really a huge use case, right? That the ability to kind of trigger, very similar if you guys are technical to remote procedural calls. So being able to automate that workflow or process, which already happens, right, in the real traditional business world, where you have like these sort of SLAs or service layer agreements that get triggered automatically. So just wanted to chime in really quick.
Yeah, no, and one other thing to note is kind of the excitement there. I'm glad it's still there, right? And the thing, it's hard to keep people excited about a project for 5 years, right? And I think so the reasons behind why we're all still kind of excited about Polkadot is some of these features are just now getting rolled out, right? These are features that have been built for the last 6-7 years, sometimes even ideated 6-7 years ago, and are now finally coming to fruition. One of those that's also very unique to Polkadot, probably in my opinion, the one thing Polkadot does better than any other ecosystem around right now, is governance, right? A lot of thought was really put into governance really early on around, Polkadot, and kind of trying to decentralize it, the ethos around Web3, trying to put as much power in the token holders' hands as possible. Let's kind of talk a little bit about governance here. I guess we can start with you this time, Emily. Kind of talk to us about kind of the general governance, and maybe since it's been talked about in the chat there, and you also mentioned it, let's maybe talk about Kusama. Just give a super short intro about what that is, because we haven't even talked about that at all, and then kind of let's go into a governance discussion around both Kusama and Polkadot.
Right, absolutely. So just a quick overview on what is Kusama. Kusama is what we call a canary network. And what does that mean, and why a canary? And it comes from this term, like a canary in the coal mines, right? Where they used to send canaries down into the coal mines, and if they came back, then it was okay to enter the coal mine. And in the same way, that's what Kusama is to Polkadot. Kusama is where Kusama gets all of Polkadot's tech before Polkadot gets it to battle test it in a real environment, right? With the exact environment, right? It has validators, it has parachains, it has dApps. And so Polkadot uses it for its tech, but more so than that, the parachains, what we're seeing, not all parachains deployed to Kusama first. A lot of them did. Some have a chain on Polkadot and Kusama. Some went to Kusama and tested it out and then ported over to Polkadot. And so Kusama really provides this environment to battle test your code, to try things, to experiment. It invites it, and we use it to not only battle test our code, but also we also audit Polkadot's code is also audited. Then it's battle tested on Kusama, and then via governance it's added to Polkadot. So Polkadot really has this extra layer that no other network has. Yes, other networks have test networks, but Polkadot does too. There's also Weston and Rococo. Like there's also test networks, but then there's like a value bearing real network where you can test this in a live environment with all the same external factors, because there's only so much you can test on a test network. For instance, when there's no validators, when there's no end users, like a test network where you're just deploying code, how are you going to test how this affects block time? How are you going to test, like, by adding code, if it slows it down, or like what the real network effects are going to be to your end users, to your validators, to all of these users? So that's something Kusama provides, and we are the only one that has it. No other, a bunch of ecosystems have talked about wanting the exact same thing, but no one's ever done it. So that's really something Polkadot has figured out. Now, I actually forgot the question. What am I supposed to answer next?
Oh, there's more kind of get into, I guess we could do this in an open format. We can go into a discussion around governance and why we think it's important and how it happens on both Polkadot and Kusama. So kind of to give a quick primer, a lot of decisions, I think most decisions in the ecosystem happen on chain for Polkadot and Kusama, which is unique and different, right? Because that's not the case with a lot of other layer 1 blockchains, right? And true governance isn't really available in many of the other ecosystems in the blockchain space. So kind of, you know, one thing that I've really enjoyed about the governance on both Polkadot and Kusama is watching the different governance proposals unfold on either chain. I think this idea around creating Kusama as like a true testnet has also created like a culture around what Kusama is, and that culture is reflected in the governance of that chain. And you could say the same about the culture and the governance of the Polkadot chain. It's a lot more, you know, institutional / enterprise kind of proposals, whereas on Kusama you do truly see a lot of chaos, which is kind of part of the saying for Kusama is expect chaos, and you do see that in the governance on the Kusama side. So the culture is definitely there. So kind of, Irvin, kind of talk to us about maybe the advantages and, if any, disadvantages you see around how governance is unfolding both on Kusama and on Polkadot. Maybe just kind of do a little quick intro there, and then we'll go into what OpenGov is quite briefly there.
Sure, I'll get the ball rolling on Gov V1, but what I highlight one thing on governance is that, like, yeah, governance is actually one of the key things that is exciting on Polkadot, and there's a lot of innovation and new things happening. Picking up on what Emily was saying on Kusama really briefly, was that was the other thing that really excited me the most, was because, as I mentioned earlier, you know, as everyone knows, you know, like, blockchains are the socio-technical or socio-economic technical systems, right? And so most people, to this day, they think that blockchains are just technical systems. So, you know, they create a test net and they, you know, they test the blockchain or stress test it, etc. But you never get to test the socioeconomic aspect of it. And so Kusama was like one of the first systems that really did that, right? That was very exciting. Okay, so but on the governance part, like, if we look at currently how governance happens for dApps or applications, and you look at, for example, Compound, right? And you go ahead and ask yourself, well, who makes the decisions for Compound application and governance? Well, it's all like the big VCs that hold a ton of CMP, right? And so they get to kind of sway the crowd, sway the masses to whatever they want. And so that doesn't really kind of help out the ecosystem, because in an ideal scenario, these decisions are going to make just based on economic interest. And so going to Gov1, and so governance one is I think what they call it is a tricameral approach, right? They have a technical committee which consists of 3 members, and then there's a council, and then there's a referenda for root level stuff, right? And so when you look at the approach for Gov v1, you really the positive sides of thing is that you have this notion of conviction voting, and then delegation. So you allow holders to participate without actually direct voting. And this kind of alleviates the fact that sometimes you can't keep track of what's happening every day. Like if you notice at Polka Häus, right? Polka Häus, there's like, I'd say probably hundreds of messages now, like every single day. You know, as soon as I wake up in the morning, there's like 100 messages. I look in the afternoon, there's 50. And so with this notion, you can delegate sort of voting to people who are most active, or sort of people who are have most conviction, right? But the negative downsides of this is that, you know, like it might take a bit of time for actual referendum to go through, and sometimes you might have like alternating opinions, right, between what the delegator and what the public may have. And also there's the other issue that sometimes like proposals might not reach voting, and so forth. And so with that, you know, there's all these things I've been considering. Governance v2 comes in. I don't know, Emily, if you want to, you know, kind of take that away and discuss that.
Yes, absolutely. I was making notes as you're writing so that I hit all the points with OpenGov and how it's you know, it's really the next level of Gov1, you know, the current Gov mechanism. And really quick, because Alex, you asked touch on Kusama, because I want to make everyone known that just like Kusama gets all of its tech before Polkadot, right now on Kusama, there is OpenGov, this new novel governance mechanism. And Polkadot is still on Gov1 because it is being battle tested before being added to Polkadot. And then once it passes governance, a vote by token holders, governance votes, then it will be added to Polkadot as well. So that's all to say that sometimes when we talk about it, even myself, you can talk about it as like this live thing that exists because it's on Kusama, but it's not yet on Polkadot. So with that being said, you know, some of the points that Irvin mentioned about the current governance, which and how it is novel, like this idea of conviction voting and delegation, that also exists on OpenGov. So conviction voting, for those that aren't aware, it's this idea that say you have 10 dot, instead of just being able, since governance is weight-based token voting, in other words, you have 10 dot, you have 10 votes, right? And you don't have one vote because you are a token holder, right? But you have as many votes as you have dot, essentially. And so it's weight-based, that's what we mean. Conviction voting allows you to change that weight. So you can agree to, if you have 10 dot, to lock it up for an additional month. And then it allows you to not only have, you're not voting with the power of 10, but you're voting with the power of 20, or you're voting with the power of 30, or you're voting with the power of 40. So by agreeing to lock your dot for an extended period of time on a vote, you can change the weight of that vote. And that is conviction voting. That also exists in OpenGov. Delegation, while delegation allows you, if, for instance, maybe you're not technical or maybe you're just busy and you don't have time to check all of these new runtime upgrades that are coming to Polkadot and really evaluate them and from a technical standpoint, well, then you can delegate your dot to someone to vote on your behalf, whether that be a validator or even Gavin Wood, or other founders like Rob Habermeyer, or so on and so forth. That already exists on Gov1, but on Gov2, or OpenGov, excuse me, OpenGov, it allows you to delegate to different people for different things. Whereas right now there is only, on Gov1, there's only one track and everything goes through one track. Whereas on OpenGov, there's multiple tracks. You know, there's a track for treasury, there's a track for runtime upgrades, there's different tracks. And then based on those tracks, you can delegate to a more technical person to maybe decide if Polkadot should get this runtime upgrade. But then you could delegate to a marketer like myself and be like, oh, I want Emily to decide for me what treasury proposals should be, you know, there's sometimes marketing treasury proposals, like people will put up a treasury proposal to have like to go to Web Summit, right? And you might be like, oh, I'm not a marketer. I want a marketer to decide if this is something that we should be doing, right? And so that is what OpenGov allows you to do. And with that at a high level, so I just touched on it with delegation, but a Gov1 just has one track, which makes it slow because we want each thing to be voted on. We want it to go to a vote for currently a 28-day period. And we do that to make sure that like things don't get added to the network because they just slip in, right? And no one's, and so it goes to vote for a long time. But because of that, that makes governance slow, right? Because if there's only one thing going to vote every 28 days, it takes a long time to get certain things through. Whereas OpenGov makes it a lot faster by having multiple tracks that can be passed at the same time, right? So proposals become faster. So that's that. But with both OpenGov and with the current governance system, things I just want to touch on that Polkadot has really thought about that truly other networks have not, is just how to have the most fair, inclusive, open governance process you could possibly have. So whales do not run Polkadot's governance. We have things in place so that it has to go to vote for a certain amount of time. It needs to pass by a certain throughput. It cannot be passed by just one person voting, and all of these kinds of things to avoid large shareholders coming in and passing things. And that we've seen this with other networks that don't have that have governance, but they don't have it in such a fair way that Polkadot is. Like one of the hugest things or most dramatic things to say, let's say, that happened in 2022 is when Solana put to governance vote they found a whale, so someone that had too much SOL that was actually threatening the network because they had so much that they could potentially get a few more SOL and be able to attack the network. So the Solana, the company itself, put it to governance vote to wipe this whale from all of their tokens. But what happened was they put it to vote for 8 hours. Within those 8 hours, 4 of the hours, the network was actually offline, so people didn't know about it. They didn't promote this vote, and a single account was able to vote many times. That's also something you vote once here with a certain weight, but on Solana's, I guess you can vote multiple times. So a single account voted 28 times. In other words, the rumors are that Solana itself voted because they never promoted this proposal. So who is this one single account that knew to vote and knew to be online? Voted 28 times, and this token holder lost all of their SOL because of it. And that's like the craziest, like that is not fair. That is not open. That is not how things should be run. So all of this to say is not possible on Polkadot. And so when really evaluating governance mechanisms, we're already at V2. We're already at the next layer of our governance. And our first one was already the best there was in the space. And now we've already had so many learnings. We're like, how can we make this faster? How can we make this better? How can we make it more inclusive? How can we, and that's where OpenGov comes in. So it's already just, and people are still trying to catch up to Gov1, to something that can compete with that. So, and really quick, I just wanted to drop Polkadot put out an excellent tweet thread just 3 days ago about what OpenGov is, with really cool diagrams and stuff. So make sure to check it out.
Awesome, Emily. Thanks for that. And yeah, it is, again, we're kind of coming up on our time here, so we'll kind of start to wrap things up here. But as everyone in here can see, like these are several of the reasons, again, as to why we Polkadot, right? All of us have had the opportunities to work with other ecosystems. Irvin and I at least still continue to do so. We collaborate with other ecosystems. We talk to other ecosystems. Irvin develops on other ecosystems. And, there's a reason why we're still involved with the Polkadot ecosystem. It is still ahead of the curve in many ways, but it is also important to recognize and realize that we are still early, right? All of these advantages we talk about, both OpenGov, cross-chain messaging, this idea around Parachains, all of this has been thought out for about 6 years, but but it's still currently an experiment, and it's currently early, and we're going to have issues. The last topic we were going to touch on, and we'll maybe do a super short conversation around it, is this topic around shared security versus not having that, right? I think that's one last thing that kind of differentiates Polkadot from, I think, any other ecosystem. There are other ecosystems that are touching on several of the things that Polkadot is doing, but the one thing that is very different from other ecosystems is shared security. And Polkadot was receiving a lot of pushback around this notion 3-4 years ago from other layer 0 projects, notably the Cosmos community, who is probably the most similar to Polkadot, and the one differentiating factor between both projects is this idea around shared security and not shared security. So kind of, Irvin, talk to us a little bit about what shared security is. Maybe we could keep it super short because I know we're running out of time here, but let's just introduce the folks here to this notion of shared security and why it's important.
Yeah, so shared security at a high level, it is meaning that these parachains that are connected to Polkadot, the Polkadot relay chain in particular, and that's the chain, it's Polkadot's chain, right? And all the parachains connect to it. And by connecting to it and leasing a slot from it, they actually benefit from the economic security that comes from the relay chain. And this isn't possible, as you mentioned, Alex, for other chains that other networks, other networks that offer like Cosmos. Let's take Cosmos because they are like Polkadot in that you would say they offer chains and dApps in this definition that I mentioned earlier. But Cosmos is a bridged network. So all of these chains are bridged to the Cosmos hub. So what does that mean? These chains need to be sovereign. They need to have their own validator, secure their own validator set, and thus secure their own economic security. Whereas when you join Polkadot, you're connecting directly to the relay chain and you inherit economic security from the relay chain's validators, and you're not securing your own validator set that's different from the hub like you're doing on Cosmos. And thus so that's ergo this shared security model.
Right. Well, cool. Yeah, we just want to keep that short. As you guys can tell, we could go on and on about kind of the reasons why we Polkadot and the lessons learned from the past and why things are done in a certain way on Polkadot. I think it's important to note here that, a lot of these other ecosystems are moving towards these things that Polkadot has been working on for years. Other ecosystems are starting to see the advantages to these and why they were put in place so many years ago. And again, last thing I'll point out is we are still all early. We all are still learning, and we're going to run into issues along the way. But the one thing that is very encouraging about the Polkadot ecosystem, and I think also another thing that's different about the Polkadot ecosystem, is just this great sense of community that happens within the ecosystem. You do see parachain teams working with one another, not necessarily competing with one another. You see even parachains that are similar to one another working together on things, which is great to see. And so I'm confident that the issues that will arise will be worked on by these great teams, both at Parity, the parachain teams themselves, the community members, and Polkadot will continue to move forward and innovate the way it has for the last 6-ish years. Irvin, good to have you back. We're kind of closing up here. I guess we can open it up to see if there are any more questions. Hopefully we answered most of the ones that were happening over there on the right. At least it's on the right for me, but if anyone does have any questions, feel free to type them in there and we'll try and answer them quickly. If not, I think Irvin dropped all of our Twitter handles, and there are other ways to get to us, but please engage if you'd like to learn more.
So we have a questions tab here. So I think we have a few questions that I can bring up to the screen if you're happy to answer.
Yeah, do it.
Beatrice, I would love to take your question here. So, and I also noticed you posted in the chat. Actually, I lead the ambassador program, and there is over 1,900 Polkadot ambassadors and another couple thousand candidates. And actually, Africa is our largest region of ambassadors. And even when we did Polkadot Decoded last year, the Africa region, we funded the most amount of side events and viewing parties in Africa. Our African community is so active, and really, I love them all. Like I work with them all, and I have nothing but great things. So I really hope that there's no one that one of the great things about, blockchain, it's inclusive, it's not exclusive. And so I really hope that no one feels like that this is an exclusive community. So everyone gets the same opportunities. And you mentioned in the chat that there is no representation on Kusama governance for them, but actually any dot holder has the exact same opportunities to participate in governance. And I can't say that because there is no photos, so I have no idea what anyone's race, if they're male or if they're female or anything, when they vote on governance. It's just it's a totally autonomous process. So I really hope that everyone just feels like it's inclusive and not exclusive. And I really can't say, I really want to just say that our African community is our greatest, it's our biggest, and that's actually just a fact. So yeah.
Well, two things around that, Emily, is to kind of follow on what you just said, is again going back to this idea that we're still early, right? So Polkadot is about to have its first event ever in India, like its first major event here in about 2 weeks. That was actually proposed by a community member, part of the KILT team, and they're putting together this major event in India for the first time. A team just proposed to do something similar in Africa. So the team behind ETH Safari is proposing to do Dot Safari, and the fact that we're so early here, I think, is kind of indicative of where we are in terms of being able to reach every corner of the world. But I'm personally now in communication with the team behind Dot Safari, and we're trying to help make that event not only a success, but also almost like a touring event. There is a project that the Polka Häus team has been working on for about 2 years now that we're calling the Web3 Tour. And we are definitely looking to expand it into the region of Africa.
Cool. Awesome. I think we actually have run out of time, but I've just skimmed through the rest of the kind of questions and comments, and I think we will cover anything that you might want to ask more about in the future sessions in this series. So I just wanted to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, all three of you, for facilitating this wonderful discussion. And I think so many comments in the chat have complimented your explanations and the way that you've described Polkadot and the ecosystem, and so it's been really, really enjoyable to listen to. So thank you so much for joining us. So there are a few things I wanted to just say to everyone here. So firstly, feel free to follow our panelists on Twitter. I've just posted those links. Cool. And then, so for the next session in this Educate series, we will be running the session on Thursday, this Thursday, so in 2 days, at the same time. So for me, that's 5:30 p.m. GMT, but for you guys, it might be slightly different time. So same time again in 2 days, and that will be on a technical deep dive into Polkadot. So please stay tuned. And finally, if you want updates, so I've said you could follow us on Twitter, and you can also join our Discord channel as well, so that we can stay in touch, and we'll be posting resources there, the links to the recording there as well. But that's pretty much it from me. I will make myself not so big now so that you can say goodbye to our wonderful speakers. Thank you everyone so much for coming, and yeah, I hope we all stay in touch. Bye guys.